Hello, everybody. It's Monday night, and it's time for another episode of Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. I'm one of your two co-hosts tonight. As you can see, we're a little light here, but that's all right because we've got a couple people to make up for that. I'm one of your two co-hosts, like I said, Tom Hunyadi. You may know me from my other show, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, where we talk all things solo McCartney. And I am joined by my partner in crime. She is the queen of everything. Once again, we know her as the queen of the backdrops. She's the queen of all Beatles media, and we know her from the books, Michael Jackson or FAQ, Michael Jackson, All That's Left to Know for the King of Pop. She's also part of the fandom and the Beatles that she co-edited with our good buddy Ken Womack, and of course her wonderful book, Songs They Were Singing, the guided tour through the Beatles' lesser known tracks. And she is the queen. Kit O'Toole. Kits, welcome again.
Thank you so much, Tom. Glad to be here tonight, and welcome everybody out there who's tuning in tonight. This is going to be a great show.
Sure is. And tonight we're talking about Tug of War, because this month it's going to be celebrating its 40th anniversary, and we thought we'd bring a few friends with us along and talk about it. And if you know this book, you know who we're talking to. They're the authors of the wonderful and very necessary book, Eight Arms to Hold You. This is like I've heard people reference this as the Bible, so it's very, very important in the solo Beatles catalog. If you have it, then you know it, and you look at it all the time. And we're talking about Chip Madinger and Mark Easter. How you guys doing today? Good to see you.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, all. Doing well, thanks.
Good. And as you can see tonight, we are a little light. We're missing a couple people. Ken Michaels, unfortunately, has come down with COVID, so he's hurting a little bit. His voice is a little rough, so he's decided to take the night off. But luckily, he's also sent us the news, so we're going to do the news as well. So thank you, Ken, for sending that to us. And our buddy Joe Mayo, unfortunately, he's not able to join us tonight as well. So that being said, Kit, I'll read the news, and then we'll get to our main topic, which is Tug of War.
Sounds good.
So Ringo Starr just announced the second leg of his all-star band tour. This will follow the first leg, which will start May 27th, with the first of two dates at the Casino Rama in Ontario. The wrap-up June 26th at Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater, Florida. The second leg will begin September 23rd at the Hartford Healthcare Amphitheater, and it will end two dates in Mexico City, October 19th and 20th at the National Auditorium. The second leg will include 19 concerts in just under a month. Perhaps a bit surprising is that Ringo will be doing a total of 7 more concerts in Canada, hitting Montreal, Kingston, and other dates, including British Columbia. Add that to the 22 dates from the first leg, and Ringo, at the age of 81 and 82, will be doing a total so far of 41 concerts. Pretty amazing.
Wow. That is incredible. And no Chicago dates, darn it.
And no Arizona dates either.
Or St. Louis.
Yeah, come on.
So all three of us are SOL on this one, I guess, huh?
I guess.
Speaking of Ringo, it was just announced that his recent book of photos of the Beatles, some of his private collections, some that were taken off the internet, called Lifted, will have what is now being called its Celestial edition coming out. This is the final edition of the book, and from what I've read, the only difference between these books and the pressing before is that each copy is signed by Ringo. The price for the book is $599, and all the proceeds go to benefit Ringo's charity, the Lotus Foundation. You can order the book exclusively through Julian's Auctions. Okay.
I think the new edition also comes in a slipcase.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
Okay, very cool. One of the many new albums that Ringo appears on for his drumming is that tribute album that to the late guitarist Johnny Winter, put together by his brother Edgar. The album is called Brother Johnny, and Ringo drums on the song Stranger, which features Michael McDonald on lead vocals and Joel Walsh on guitar. So something else to look forward to from
lineup.
Ringo. Yeah. And Michael McDowell, we're talking about seeing, what were we talking
Doobie
about
Brothers.
seeing? Doobie Brothers, that's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of doobies, we'll get to that here in a few minutes. The Grammy Awards took place Sunday night, April 3rd, and Paul and George were nominated in different categories. Paul had 2 nominations and lost to both for Best Song or Best Rock Song. Paul's Find My Way from his McCartney 3 album was nominated and lost out to Foo Fighters' song Waiting on a War. Paul's McCartney 3 was also nominated for Best Rock Album, but also lost out to the Foo Fighters for their latest Medicine at Midnight album. However, George Harrison was nominated in the category for Best Box Set or Special Limited Edition Package for All Things Must Pass 50th Anniversary Edition and won the prize for the category, with Darren Evans, Danny, and Olivia Harrison listed as art directors. Great. Olivia was there at the ceremony accepting the award, and she said, "Congratulations to Danny for driving the reissue, Paul Hicks for remixing the 70 tracks, and to the entire team for their love and hard work. To George for giving us the opportunity to revel in your music, which is full of hope, compassion, and rock and roll." Danny Harrison added, "Congratulations to our team, Paul Hicks, names I can't pronounce, Spencer Ramsey, Richard Radford, Dodd Fleming, Rachel Cooper, and all of George and Olivia Harrison for bringing our love of All Things Must Pass to life with the Grammy-winning box set. Thank you to all of our friends at Universal for letting us go big." And that was big box set, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was.
All right.
Well
it should also be pointed out that that in the Best Rock Song category, another song was nominated with a Beatles connection, and that was Weezer's "All My Favorite Songs," which was co-written by, was it Isley Juber? Is that how you pronounce it, kids?
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the daughter of Lawrence and Hope Juber. Lawrence, of course, being the last lead guitarist in Wings. Okay, so the big controversy that's going around right now, a lot of people talking about this, and I'm sure we'll all have our opinions, and I know a lot of people are dying to hear what we have to say about this. Ultimate Classic Rock is reporting that in honor of George's classic album, All Things Must Pass, the cannabis company Dadgrass has announced a special line of products called All Things Must Grass. This collections include pre-rolled joints, rolling papers, a rolling tray, posters, buttons, pins, matches, and stickers. A special Dad Stash edition disguises the pack of joints to look like a double cassette version of All Things Must Pass. I do think that's kind of cool. This is, in fact, a collaboration with the Harrison estate, making it the first cannabis partnership with any of the Beatles, which I'm kind of surprised by that Paul wasn't the first, but that's another story. A press release from Dadgrass says that the joints are crafted from a mix of organic CBD and CBG hemp. We tend to shy away from the high test blow your mind weed that the kids are into today, said Ben Starmer, co-founder and CEO of Dadgrass. For this project, we set out to create a mellower kind of joint, something that blended together the type of high quality, low potency, and all natural flower that was around when George was having a laugh back in the early 70s. Just a classic smoke for a classic bloke. Kid O'Toole, what do you think?
Oh boy. I just, I've said this on other, Facebook forums, we've discussed this. I just think, regardless of your view, marijuana, and yes, I understand this is the kind of marijuana that you don't get high from.
Right.
I mean, I understand that. But the fact that George died from lung cancer, I just think, connecting him to a smoking product of any kind, I just think is really tasteless.
Yeah, I was about to say poor taste.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible poor taste.
Exactly. And I'm just really shocked that the Harrison estate doesn't, see that connection. I mean, or just chooses not to, just chooses to ignore it. I was just shocked when this news came out. I just think it's really, at the very least, extremely tacky.
Well, I was just talking to the wife about this, and it's like, well, is 20 years too soon? But we don't know what sort of relief that George might have gotten from using marijuana. So,
I think it's more what,
crass, but it's. Yeah. I can see why they thought it was a good idea at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what Kit was saying, that regardless, it's a smoking product.
Yeah.
It's, it whatever it is. I just think that it crosses a line that, I find it pretty offensive. But oh well, I'm an old man.
Well, it's funny you say that, Mark, because I was talking with other people earlier today about that word offensive, and we're taking, because I disapprove of it as well. I'm not as bothered by it as a lot of people are, but where are comments from Paul and Ringo disapproving of this? Where are comments from people that knew George best?
Paul never would. Talking about the ultimate,
exactly,
the ultimate,
right? The ultimate stoner. But
exactly.
Where are comments from other people that knew George best that may be offended by this? Where are comments from Jeff and Bob or Eric for that matter? Why aren't other people, celebrities or people that knew George best, why aren't they offended by this? Is my question. And if Danny and Olivia aren't, then why should we?
It's just a personal.
Yeah. And I'm with you, Mark. But now, and other people have said, well, but this appeals to, this is like George's sense of humor. All things must grass, and we were talking before the show about, the images of the gnome smoking. All George would have thought that was funny. And I'm like, well, maybe, but to me though, it just goes back to, how did George die? I mean, I just, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it's, again, doing some research, was it he get brain cancer first and then it went to his lungs, or something like that?
I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at this.
Well,
but again,
initially it was throat cancer.
Was it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
And that was directly related to his
related to smoking, and he has talked about that too.
Yeah.
But then again, if anybody is going to know better than us, Danny and Olivia, should know better than us whether or not he would approve of something like this, in my opinion.
It's not that I'm not really going at it from the, would he have approved or what? It's just the whole thing just kind of, it's skunky.
Which a lot of it smells skunky.
Well put.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, the people in charge of this, Ed Chen sent us an article. I guess apparently this has been in the works for the last year or a year and a half or so, trying to find this blend. And they said some other high profile collaborations are in the work as well. So we might get that Let Me Roll It set just still. So the Let Me Roll It and the high sets I'm sure are coming next. But I'm going to be showing my disapproval by not purchasing any of the products involved with this. Now, me being the Paul fanatic that I am, it might be a little tougher to say no to that. But then again, I don't want to be a hypocrite, because I've smoked marijuana in the past, and I don't want to say that I completely disagree with.
Well,
this,
same
but,
here.
It's
not. It's more just is this the kind of thing we want to attach to these records and to this, but that's me.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people too are mentioning, okay, the gnomes, they're taking the gnomes on the cover and making them smoke or, smoke this stuff or whatever. And people are offended by that, which is fine too. I get that, but I mean, if the Beatles don't want to be associated with drugs, should they take the marijuana leaf plants off the Sgt. Pepper cover as well? I mean, there's multiple ways you can, go about this, but I'm just going to leave it alone. After this, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm not going to look at it anymore. And that's that. But anybody else want to make a last comment about this before we continue?
Well, if you look at the gnomes on the cover, and if you've got the Uber box and have the nice little, you can see that most of them all had a pipe in hand.
Right.
Okay. So,
all right.
By the way his hands are, he had a pipe at one point.
Right. Yeah.
So,
all right. I got. Okay. All right. We were talking about before the show, and I was like, not the gnomes. Come on. All right. You got a point. The gnomes were smoking pipes.
They're smoking something. Anyways, so before we get to tug of war, we're gonna talk to Mark and Chip about this beauty, the 8 Arms to Hold You. What's going on with the book now. But first, let's just talk about a little bit about the origins of this. And we mentioned before the show this book here, All Together Now, which I would assume that was a big influence on what you guys have created, correct?
Sure. I mean, that was one of the first big mass market Beatles books. I remember buying it in 1975, end of 75, beginning of 76. And it was just like, oh my God, this is the kind of information I've always wanted to know, release dates and to know, when things came out, and dispelling some myths. And, but it was, again, at that time, there weren't a lot of Beatles books. And so that was, to have one that was specifically dedicated to the work, to the releases, was, that and the illustrated record by Roy Carr and Tony Tyler were like, my God, where did these come from? Because before that, it was pretty much the Hunter Davis book and Longest Cocktail Party, which are amazing books, but they covered different things. And so those books were really the first ones to look at the music, the work. And so those absolutely, that book, All Together Now specifically was a big influence without a doubt.
Right. Yeah, I just found a really good copy of The Longest Cocktail Party, so I'm looking forward to digging into that. But Chip, talk about your experience with the All Together Now book.
I was going to say that 8 Arms to Hold You was kind of a hybrid of the All Together Now and the Roy Carr and Tony Taylor book by taking the actual physical information about the discs and combining it with background and commentary.
Yeah, and you want to talk commentary, the Roy Carr and Tony Tyler book, those guys let it fly.
They didn't hold back, huh?
Not one little bit. But that was incredibly for a 10-year-old kid like me when that book first came out, to read that stuff and for my opinions to be challenged like that at that time. Because at that, 10 years old, oh, it's all wonderful, And so, to have, I think one of my favorite phrases, and they're not that I necessarily agree with it, but I think one of them was about ding dong, maybe. And it's like a two-line review, and the end of it, he just says a pox on it. And it was like, oh my God, first of all, what's a pox at the end of 10 years? I got to go look that up. So it broadened my vocabulary greatly. Right. But also just, okay, that's what these guys think. And, they review for the NME and they're, so, so it was, Chip's absolutely right. It was putting those two together, sort of the ultimate goal, but bring it up to date.
Do you think something like that turns a young fan off from going off and listening to it themselves and get their own opinion on that?
Not me. That was one thing we really wanted 8 Arms to do, was to encourage people to go back and to discover all of this, and to listen to these things and to listen to all the different versions of these things. Right. And, you'll make up your own opinion. You'll make up your own history based on. So you know, that was one of our goals right out of the box.
Right.
Yeah. What I say is not going to deter someone from
right
from discovering something on their own. It's, you know, it might give them a different viewpoint or whatever, and that's the whole idea. So.
Gotcha. Was there any talk of ever including the Beatles discography in this book or at all, or was it always just going to be a solo Beatles project?
It was always solo.
Yeah. Okay.
It came out of in 1995. I did a bootleg guide for the 910 with Doug Sulpy.
Mm.
And
I have that.
Thank you.
Great book.
And I was kind of assimilating information for an update. And Doug and I kind of had differing opinions, as we have since day one, on what it should be included. And we just decided, okay, we're going to put the blue book to rest, and you go do your thing. And it grew from that. I mean,
yeah. So, and then Kit, before I get to you, one other question is was it always going to be one big book, or did you guys think about breaking it down into decades as well? You know what I mean? Instead of just putting all your time and energies into one book, you know, why not break it up, you know, do a decade, take a break, and then go back to it? I mean, was there any talks of that, or was it all just always going to be one big book?
It was always one book, and you could look at it two different ways. You could look at it with each individual ex-Beatle and all of their history, or you could do the All Together Now and put everything together. And that gets real messy if you want to go start looking for, oh, what's that song on Mind Games? And you know, when did it come out? And you're just going through indexes the whole time.
Okay. Kit?
Yeah, I have definitely been wanting to ask you guys this for so long, because I'll tell you folks, I mean, this book is just so full of information.
Yes.
About I mean, this is the subtitles, the Solo Beatles Compendium, and it's not a lie. It really is. Yeah. I mean, it really has every detail you would want to know about the sessions of recording, you know, their albums. I mean, everything, outtakes, everything you can imagine. So my first question is, how did you compile all this information? I mean, how did you go about this research?
Well, I've been collecting. You know, I discovered music a little later than Mark. I started out with sports, and then we were living in central Illinois, and I could pick up WLS off of the AM. And at that time, it was right in 1973 when we had the deluge with Red Rose and Mind Games and Band on the Run and Material World and the Red and the Blue album. So I was kind of hit with it all at once. You know, I remember hearing things earlier than that, but I've always kind of been a collector, not only of music, but of information as well. And it came down to that this book didn't exist, but I wanted it, so I guess I have to write it.
Yep, and one of our viewers said that it was, you know, was a high time, you know, for a book to be, for this book to be written. That it was, you know, really filled a niche, and you know, it filled a gap of information. You know, particularly the solo catalog. How long did it take to compile all of this?
I don't remember what we were saying. It took 3 years from start of writing to publication. And before that, I think it's kind of one of those things that, you know, an artist's first album is going to contain some of its best material because he's been creating it throughout his entire life as an artist. And I think that's kind of what happened here is, you know, we pick up information along the way and, okay, we need those B-sides, and the Australian mix is different than this one. And, you know, you create your own collection. You know, we were back in the analog days and making mixtapes and compilations. as opposed to just downloading everything at once nowadays and
Sure.
turning it into a playlist. But to answer your question, you know, probably a solid, when did that come out? That came out in 2000.
2000.
I'd say maybe 25 years of assimilating, you know, off-air tapes and interviews and clippings and the like. And it was just assimilating all that into something that I could use that would be useful to others. And that way I could forget all that information because I had it down in the book.
Mm.
Well, thank you for doing that.
and he came in a year into it. And like we said earlier, turned it from an auto parts catalog into something that you could read.
Right.
Well, and that's the other thing. We were talking a little bit about this before the show, that, yeah, it doesn't read just like, you know, a manual or something, that it does, you know, it certainly gives you the information that you want, but it is also, you know, a fun read. And and the fact that you do interject some opinion into it does make it fun, and whether you agree with it or not. And I think that was, and Mark, you were mentioning that was very intentional.
Oh, absolutely. That you know, as Chip was saying, you know, we wanted this book. I think another frustration from years of books about the individual Beatles was that you would notice that they would cover their solo years in almost like an appendix at the end of the book. They would, even though it was about Paul McCartney, they would spend the entire book talking about 1942 to 1970, and then 1970 on will be covered in 20 pages at the end of the book.
Absolutely.
You know, so that frustration of, you know, there is interesting information, folks, that people would probably like to hear. The history does not begin and end with the Beatles. And so that frustration, it was like, okay, well, we're really going to give it to you. So, you know, that's why it's 720 pages, because it's like, okay, this up to that point in 2000, like, we want to put it all out there. We want what we would have wanted to have gotten in the mail when that book came through. And so, yeah, and so that's, you know, with being fans, but also being collectors. And then also, as Chip said, you know, just wanting to make sure that there was a place for all this amazing research that Chip is the researcher and I'm the writer. I mean, that's kind of, it's simplified because I also enjoy research, and also, you know, and Chip also enjoys writing. But when it came, especially to 8 Arms, I think it's just easier to put it that way. But we wanted it to all be in one wonderful little wrapped up package that hopefully, despite its size, people could either read from the beginning and go all the way through, or they could just pick up in the middle and go, you know, and it kind of worked out that way. So
if you string them end to end, we're talking about 100 years of music history,
right?
30 years each for, and 10 years for John. So there's a lot of history in this book, and that's something that Mark brought to it, was a broader knowledge, while I was all drilled down on all the different McCartney mixes and live tapes and everything. Mark brought in the context of what else was going on at the time. And
yeah, I mean, I'm a history major, you know, that was I'm a historian, and also I'm an editor, and that's another thing that I bring to it. I've worked, thanks to my friendship with Andrew Sandoval, I've worked in editing, and you know, if you buy any of the Monkees projects or the things that, you know, all of those things that come out through Rhino that he's worked with, you'll see my name as editorial supervisor or doing something like that. That's because I've worked with him for 25 years on that kind of stuff as well. I just, it's an ability to look at the material and say, okay, what do we need here? What do we not need here? Let's rearrange this. Let's, you know, I view it from that eye as well. So, you know, so with Chip and me, it was a perfect marriage in terms of our talents. And so it was, And the funny thing is, you'd think we'd had, butted heads, and we really never did. I mean, it was, once or twice maybe, but comparatively.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever told you this or not,
Uh-oh.
but I could always, as soon as I opened the door, I knew if we were going to get anything done that night, that we were going to be productive, or one of us was going to be in a mood and nothing was going to happen.
Yeah.
Before we even made it down to turn on the computer.
Yes.
I had a good idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the other end, just to interject, is another, what I was doing during that time, that entire time of writing. I had left, I used to work with Chip. I knew Chip long before, but Chip and I worked together. And so I left my job. I completely rearranged my life. I went back and got my master's in counseling and got a new job. I started driving 100 miles back and forth, going back and getting, doing all of this stuff. I completely changed my life at the same time, literally the same, like within the same month that we just started writing the book. So yeah, so all of a sudden I upended my life, and decided, and at the same time, I'm also going to write this 720-page book with Chip. So it was, I look back and I think, God, how did I do it? But I was 33 years old and not 56. So, it was
still pretty young.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you guys, was your love for the solo Beatles, did it come from being Beatles fans first, or were you guys solo Beatles fans first?
Beatles first for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was more aware of even though I've got a couple of years on Mark, when I discovered it was, 70, 71. So as it unfolded for me, that's kind of where I have more of an affinity and where, my fandom came about. So a neighbor gave me a pile of records and there was some Beatles stuff in there. And there was a dollar bin down at the used record store with trashed copies, but still you could have the cover and you could, go in and discover the albums in retrospect.
Yeah. I'm fortunate. My parents were, 19, 20 years old when I was born in 65. So, I had it in my bassinet. And, my first records that I actually purchased with my own money when I was a little bitty kid, 3, 4, 5 years old, were Beatles records. So, so I'm lucky that I was sort of a first and a half generation fan.
Right. They put you to work early if you're buying your own.
That was, I learned the value of a quarter very early on. So, and I always wanted records. And so I was, one of those annoying little kids who just, would go to the record store and say, I really want, do you have this? Do you have this? So, so for me, it was the Beatles going into the solo stuff, but yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the ebook, which it is now. Let's whose idea was this? What did you guys do differently?
I'll let Mark tell this. He tells it better about how it was out of print and we wanted to bring it back to.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, because of the fact that we were seeing that, we made a finite number of copies. We made 3,000 copies, and once they were gone, they were gone. And as time went on, we felt like, well, okay, we did all this work, and it's good work, it's good research, regardless of the fact that it ends in 2000. The prime years are there from 1966 to 2000, and we felt that it deserved to still be out there in a purchasable form versus having to go on to eBay or what have you to pay $300 or whatever for a copy of it. And so we were very resistant at first to the idea of doing an ebook, just for the very reason that once it's out there, it's out there. You have no control anymore over its distribution and do you get paid for it? No. Do you get, so you have to we had to go through that process. Chip and I did, okay, what are we okay with and what are we not okay with? so Chip came up with the process of being able to have a PDF of the book, of being able to make it to where if you sold it, it had to be tied to a code and so on and so forth. So at least we had some control over that. But really, it was just we wanted our work to have a life beyond the 3,000 copies of the book that we printed. And so this was the way we could do that without having to go to, frankly, also to the expense of printing up more books without the knowledge of, are we going to be able to sell these? So
I mean, and I'm sure in those 20 years as well, people were like, hey, where's part 2 coming? You know, why isn't this book available? Why do I have to pay $300 on eBay to get this book? I mean, I'm sure you guys were getting hammered.
Oh, yeah.
Left and right, you know.
Yeah.
And the content of the ebook was, and Mark explains this better than I do as well, on how we froze it in time at the year 2000, but we went through, picked up, you know, some real clunkers and fixed those mistakes and things, and added a ton of new session information into the book. And so it was basically, we swapped out about 30,000 words, you know, good new ones, you know, pushed out the old bad ones.
Yeah. And that's something that, you know, we've gotten some comment about, which I understand, and Chip does too, about wanting, you know, why didn't you just go ahead, update it all the way, bring it to current day? You know that all, you know, some of these sources have been supplanted by superior things and And the fact is, we didn't want to do that. We thought what we want to do is present the book that we had, clean up the mistakes that we knew we made, you know, the day after it came out, and still have the book out there, but leave it in the year 2000, where, you know, I think we say in the introduction, you know, George is still with us. Paul hasn't yet destroyed his life by marrying Heather. Paul hasn't, you know, we leave it in that, you know, in that time. And so, but, you know, so we make it the best possible book that it would have been in 2000.
And we wanted to add value to the ebook as well, so that if somebody had bought a hard copy of the book, didn't think, oh, I'm getting dinged twice for this. I mean, there's great new information in the ebook.
Lots of good session information, Paul session information, George session information, John certainly, that was not available in the original. There wasn't the access to it then.
Gotcha.
So we're getting just a few questions here in the comments. So there are not going to be any more pressings of a physical copy of the book. It's just the ebook, right? Okay.
That is it.
We just got a few questions about that.
Yeah.
And
that's like asking Mark Lewison, where's volume 2 of Tune In?
No, just got like three people ask that question. So I thought I better ask it.
Sure.
And also, I got a question. Did you both crank the tunes while you were writing and researching the book?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I remember. We'd usually start our sessions by taking a trip to the record store, just to warm up and then riff a little bit,
and then some things we had to kind of you know, just get our heads around. Okay, I haven't listened to Bad Boy in 20 years, so, you know, we need to get, you know, reacquainted with these things. So so yeah, there was certainly quite a bit of listening, and, you know, Chip without a doubt did more listening than anybody else. I mean, when it comes to, you know, I still think one of the great things about the original book is putting paid to the myth about Wings Over America, and the fact that Chip went through every single audience tape of that tour, everything that was available, and dispelled the myth that there was all this overdubbing that occurred.
I married them back to the original.
The originals, like,
oh wow.
So the audience tape I'd sync up with the album, and okay, they're drifting too much. That's not the same show. the first time you hear the Denver concert, listening to Soily, you hear his introduction, and that's the one that's on the album.
Right.
And it's note for note. I mean, they did not do a lot of polishing work on that. It was all for the syncing to the film.
Right, when they did Rock Show. Yeah. And the fact is that album came out very quickly.
Yeah.
After the tour. And so they were still touring. They went to Venice, and they went, late in 76. So there was not a lot of time to work on that album. So it wasn't like they could have anyway, but there's always been this myth that, well, they basically re-recorded the whole record in the studio, and not true. Which I thought was not only that, but also knowing what shows each of the tracks came from, which was certainly not available in the original album.
There's definitely stories now of these great live albums from the 70s, and the stories now where we get that you hear well, we did some fixing up in the studio because this guitar solo was lacking, so we had to re-record this that. So you do hear that from time to time. So I mean, so kudos for you, Chip, for taking the time and to absolutely doing that. Tell us where people can order this new ebook version.
Everything can be ordered through the Lennonology website, which is there you go.
There you go.
What is that last? Chip, your writing still stinks. What's the last three? .com. Okay.
.com.
It looks like
in the description.
Yeah.
Okay.
And add a slash and the word order, and you'll be on the ordering page.
All right.
Just a quick question from one more person here, from our friend Asselger, who we got to meet at the this past Fest for Beatles fans, and he asked, Chip, is it true that you were originally involved with the upcoming McCartney Legacy book?
I was in on the early stages of that, on the planning of that, and then it just became too much of a conflict with the second Lennonology volume with trying to juggle both of them at the same time. So yes, I was, but that's something I'm really looking forward to. It's coming out at the end of this year. So Aid and Alan have done a great job on it.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to to be in the loop on that, and really looking forward to hearing some stuff on that, or reading it finally. So, but Kit, if no more questions, we'll get to the today's topic.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so Tug of War. This is the album that's got a lot of praise for Paul. I mean, obviously went to #1. It had a #1 single from it. It had another top 10 single from it. It was, being hailed as a modern day masterpiece from McCartney at the time. And just a lot of stuff was just, it was just highly considered. And looking at it now, as you do the research, which you do, thanks to 8 Arms to Hold You. I mean, you'll see that the collaboration between Paul and George Martin really started with the We All Stand Together. That was the first thing that they worked on as they reestablished their partnership. Obviously, they worked together, a little bit in the 70s as well. But this, this new partnership really started with the We All Stand Together song, correct?
If that's what the book says.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was the first.
I think you're correct.
It was the first. I mean, interestingly, it was the first thing recorded, and then ended up being the last thing released from that collaboration. And but yeah, that is the truth. But also, George, for the first time in a long time, George Martin acted as an editor for Paul. And if you listen to those demos, which first came out, what year, Chip, like 86, 87?
86, yeah.
Yeah. That set of demos, there's some really painful stuff on those demos. Things that it was like, did you really send this to George Martin as your top drawer material at the time?
Oil crisis.
Yeah, or just, you don't know what is it. You don't know where you're going. Yeah, anyway, just
better stop. You don't know where she came from.
Yeah, these songs, and you're just like, are you kidding me? And then there are other songs where you can hear the germ of an amazing track, but you wouldn't necessarily hear it in the demo. It just kind of meanders. Something like "Take It Away" sounds great at first, but he just kind of peters out toward the end. So you can hear where the collaboration started with those demos, and realizing that George really helped Paul sort of collate and go through and say, okay, well, this needs work. This needs, go back and do more work on these. So,
and a lot of the work on this started with Wings. It was
right.
Yes, the last Wings sessions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And but I think George was also instrumental in saying you don't need Wings. Right. You are the artist here. And so he definitely challenged Paul in a way that he hadn't been challenged in 10 years.
Right. Yeah, well, we've had Lawrence Juber on the my other show, and he talked about how during these sessions he didn't really feel that these were band songs. He felt they were just more studio, Paul, songs, and maybe he was right,
Yeah.
So another myth too is people think that all of this was recorded at Montserrat, which really isn't true either. These are recorded, in multiple times throughout 80, 81. Obviously there was that break there because of Lennon's untimely death. But it seemed like things were really moving quickly up until that day in December of 1980.
Well, I don't know that the start date of the sessions was impacted by that. I think that they started down there 1st of February, Mark.
Yeah, it was fairly quick. And
there was a year in there. Never mind.
Yeah.
Right. You got December of 80, so to April 81 to March of 82. So they're obviously working on it a little bit before Lennon's passing. As a matter of fact, I think they went into the studio that day.
Right. Well, they did Rain Clouds that day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were definitely working toward a record, and it had already the sessions had begun. And then Paul obviously took a few months off, and then they headed down to Montserrat. But, but before that, obviously, Paul got together with George Harrison and George Martin to do all those years ago thing at Friar Park. Right. So that, dates Chip like March, I think, instead of 81, I believe.
I think it was more into I know they had tracked Wanderlust already, because that's the main reason they went out to George's studio. Was
to have him play a solo on it.
On that, and George is like, well, we're here. Can we do this real quick? And Denny and Linda were theirs. So they added the background vocals, and then never did anything with Wanderlust.
Yeah, and then George buried them in the mix.
Right.
So.
Well, I'm sure George wanted to do a lick after every line in Wanderlust too.
Exactly. Yeah, so stop doing your Hey Jude thing here.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. But.
But Kit, talk about these early sessions from you. There are a lot of stuff's going on. Obviously, you being the big Stevie Wonder fan that you are. Obviously, Paul has always talked highly of being a Stevie fan, and just being a marvel of his work. When did talk about that? When that came to be throughout the sessions.
Right. I'm a huge Stevie Wonder fan. And so, them working together in Montserrat, and of course, Ebony and Ivory now. And I have to say, this was one moment in your book where I thought, oh no, because what's that you're doing? I love that track. I love it. It's a jam. I completely agree.
As George Martin says, horses for courses. So, it's once again, just our point of view.
But I agree. It's not, it was meant to be Jim, but Paul's vocals I think on it are incredible. I mean, I love, it's just, I think Stevie brought out all this, a little more soulful side and yeah, I mean, definitely, I think Stevie, challenged Paul to keep up with him. And I didn't realize that was an all-night session. You mentioned that it was all night. Wow.
Well, Stevie was late a lot. Yes. Apparently, that's
he was known for that.
Yeah, well, and that's actually one of the things that Paul mentions in the lyrics. This, in his book, that Stevie was always late. That right. He would say, "Okay, I'll be in Montserrat this date, this Friday," and so they would wait. Friday, no Stevie. Saturday, no Stevie. Sunday, no Stevie. They'd call. Paul would say, "It's Paul McCartney." I would with Stevie's handlers say, when we Mr. Wonder is in the studio and could not be disturbed. So that was one of the stories in the book that kind of made me laugh. He said if he finally showed up, and then the same thing happened with the video when they did the video, and they had to film everything separately because of that. So
yep. And I have to, by the way, thank your book too for alerting me to. I never knew there was a second video for Ebony and Ivory. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, I knew about that first one. I mean, that was played to death. But that second one with just and it was Paul. Just the Paul vocal. I never knew that.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember where it was. It wasn't obviously not played often, but
no.
But yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah, and without Stevie's vocals, right. And I mean, right. I never remember seeing that here ever. I mean, that's the thing. That's what I love about your book. I mean, I just things like that I never knew.
And that all version was also on the 12-inch version of Ebony and Ivory as well. So
right.
People determine which version like better. So.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I think
that one hasn't aged well.
No, well, I think Paul finally got the clue during the Flowers in the Dirt tour when he would play the song and people would be running out for beer. It was like I think he expected, this was a big hit, so people are going to want to hear this. And at that point, it was only 8 years after the song had come out.
Yeah.
But it was he dropped it quickly. It did not make it into future legs of the tour. So.
Oh, really?
Well, and I was actually going to ask you guys about that because I remember when that came out. I mean, it was a monster hit.
Couldn't get away from it.
Yeah. I mean, it was played all the time. It was number one for I forget how
7 weeks.
7 weeks
straight. Yeah, I mean, it was an enormous hit. Yeah.
It really was, and as you said, you couldn't get away from it. Yeah. And now, everybody likes to dump on it, and and while it's certainly, I mean, I kind of get it in that it's, the lyrics are a bit simplistic. I mean, that's true. I don't know if why exactly. I mean, and maybe it was a bit as big a hit as it was because it was Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. I mean, the two superstars getting together. I don't know. Why do you guys think? Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I just want to say too. Also, with the 80s, I know duets were big in the 70s too, but duets just I think exploded in the 80s. Duets were big business in the 80s.
Yeah, and let's face it, that album would not have been the enormous hit it was without that song.
Absolutely.
So it's the so that's the give and take with it is that I always felt like having that track as the last song on the album didn't do it any favors because it didn't have a strong closing.
Didn't have Paul's big ballad close like on Pipes of Peace. And
See, that was exactly.
And,
I always felt like if you'd have had, Through Our Love, Through Our Love, which was really to me like the last big Paul George Martin collaboration, and that from that those sessions, with the huge orchestra pounding at the end, it would have been a more impressive ending to that record. But yeah, I just always felt like it sort of dressed me up as a robber and then Ebony Ivory.
Okay.
So that was always my issue with it, that I just felt from the beginning that the song, as you said, it was not going to age well. It was not, because of the fact that it was so omnipresent.
Yeah.
Kind of like We Are the World or something, those songs from the 80s were just like, oh my God, I never ever want to hear this song again. It takes, it's from a time and a place. And the first time you heard it, or the second time you go, oh, that's nice. What a nice sentiment. And then it gets played, and then it gets played, and then it gets played, and then it gets played. It's not the song's fault. It's just those are the realities of it. It's just it became too enmeshed in the consciousness, and then you had that great Saturday Night Live skit with Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo, with Sinatra coming in to do his bit.
Blind as a bat,
and I have sight. Yeah,
yeah.
Once that happened, it was like, well, this song is done.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
So we mentioned Stevie Wonder. I mean, this album was also like a who's who of big musicians too at the time. We talk about Stevie Wonder. We talk about Stanley Clarke and Steve Gadd. Also Eric Stewart comes to mind as well too. But we have one of Paul's biggest idols too with with the song Get It, and not necessarily one of my favorites, but but I kind of like the song that he wrote. His name's I should have wrote that because it's what's that? Yeah, thank you, Perkins. It's not a bad song, but the song that he wrote on his last day at Montserrat, it was 10 times better than Get It. I always thought that was just a beautiful song, and it's too bad that they couldn't work out a way to sing that song on Tug of War. I think it would have enhanced it maybe, but anyways, who else on that? Like I said, Eric Stewart came in a little later as well too, and then we also don't forget that during this whole time is he's also doing this stuff with Michael Jackson, which obviously will come in 82 and 83, but he's working with everybody at this point in time. It's pretty amazing.
Found a good formula.
Right. Yeah.
But Tug of War really kind of loses gas after Wanderlust.
That's what we were going to get into next, was like highlights, the track listing, because in my opinion, it really does start strong, but then in my opinion, it kind of peters out at the end. But the question, go ahead.
I was just going to say, before we get into that, I just wanted to mention, you guys talk quite a bit in your book about Eric Stewart and his presence on this album, and I just wanted to sidetrack it a little bit into that before we get into it, because I thought you made some very interesting points about that, and I just wanted you guys to expand upon that. You said you mentioned many times there was a real 10cc sound to the album, so I just wanted you guys to explain a little bit about that. What influence do you think Eric Stewart had on these sessions?
Well, I think there's those masked backing vocals that are a 10cc trademark are all over that record, and something like especially the perfect example is the end of Take It Away. I mean those it's that's Eric Stewart arrangement. He making overdubbing, and also bringing Linda into a mix that really made her, she's very present on that record, but in a great way. She really managed to. There was a blend there with those vocals with Eric, Paul, and Linda, overdubbed many times over. That is fantastic, and it has a real a quality that Paul had never had on his records before in terms of backing vocals. And so I think that bringing him in was just a terrific idea. And, you know, Eric had sort of somewhat ended 10cc at that point, or at least they were on sort of a hiatus at that point. So yeah, it was a great marriage, and it's unfortunate what ended up happening with them on you know, the beginnings of Press to Play the you know, it went all upsided, but yeah, that his work is tremendous on those records.
Okay.
And not to say that Paul didn't have good backing vocals previously with Wings. I mean, listen to Silly Love Songs and listen to With a Little Luck. I mean, they were getting there, but I mean, they really perfected it by the time it hit Tug of War.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that with that layered kind of sound that 10cc was known for. So, but yeah, and of course, you know, Paul would go on to work with, as you mentioned, with Eric Stewart quite a bit in the 80s. So this was their first collaboration. But I just wanted you to comment on that, because you make you mentioned that quite a number of times, you know, what an influence he was over this album. And also, before we go on to the tracks, wow, Stanley Clarke tried to teach Paul slap bass. I would have loved to have been in the studio to eavesdrop on that.
Yeah.
He used it too. Listen to Ebony and Ivory. He's got some of that pop.
Really?
In his bass line on. Give a listen to that.
Also,
isn't that there has to be like a slap bass too at the beginning of No More Lonely Nights, where he's going boom, 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 boom. You know, that gotta be like a slap style too.
Wow.
But as so many of his albums, you know, he usually has enough to make a double album, and then plus he's also working on a possible Cold Cuts record, you know, during this time as well, that unfortunately doesn't work out. You know, we talk about how, you know, George and, you know, was kind of like a buffer and, you know, picked the best tracks. Do we think that the best songs from those sessions were on this album? Could this album could have been even better? You know, I seem to think so. I
think Mark has an answer for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've always felt since, you know, especially after Pipes of Peace came out a year and a half later, I felt like, wow, you know, if you would have been able to have taken the best songs, you know, and those songs were available during Tug of War. They were, you know, they were of a piece. I mean, if they'd have taken songs like Keep Under Cover or Through Our Love, as I said earlier, you know, and replaced some of the tracks on Tug of War that were a little I mean, this is just me, made it a true Paul McCartney album. No special guests, you know. Let's take the special guests, do a duets album, and do that thing on a duets album. But to make a pure Paul McCartney album, replace those tracks with the tracks from Pipes of Peace, and you have, you know, an album that easily stands up to anything else he ever did.
Right. Because that was going to be one of my questions. Do the duets kind of like hurt the album a little bit now? I mean, obviously, maybe it helped, you know.
It certainly helps sales
at that point in time, you know. But now looking back, you know,
it's more of a novelty factor, than an artistic gesture, you know. In my view, you know, again, this is just me talking, but that's the way I've always felt about including, you know, special guests, that unless you're going to do a whole thing with them, or that's going to be the concept where you know, do the duets thing. Right. There's no Paul doesn't need any help.
Right. No, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. You know, and especially when you got less songs like, you know, I'll Give You a Ring available, which I think
exactly
is,
perfect example.
Fantastic song.
Even which I mean, but that song had been on, you know, but I'll Give You a Ring had been around for almost 10 years at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so
right.
But yeah, there were definitely better songs to be had that would have made that album not as dated. Or have aged better, I guess I should say.
Gotcha. The album starts with Tug of War, the title track. Myself, I'm not the biggest fan of the push in and pull in part of the song. I think it kind of hurts it a little bit, but great song, good video. What are you guys' thoughts on the opener, Mark?
I large monkeys.
What's that?
The video with large monkeys.
Yes. No, I love it. I mean, it's with even with the pushing and pulling. No, I think it's a tremendous track. It really it makes the statement of what this record is going to be right off the bat. I remember. I mean, as a side point, we were lucky in St. Louis. The local radio station, KSHE, which is sort of the big AOR station, has been around since 1967. They got a copy of the album a month and a half early and played it in its entirety in late March, mid to late March of 82. And they said they were going to be playing it. And I'm riding around in my 68 Mustang with a bunch of friends. And I'm like, I need to go home and record this, but I can't. So I'm riding around with them and I'm like, will you guys just shut up so I can listen to this? But right away. Yeah. And by the way, Casey got a cease and desist letter like 3 or 4 days later from CBS. I think, I don't know if we mentioned that in the book, but anyway, so they had to quell it until then, but they played the whole album front to back.
Wow.
With no commercials, wow. So, which was great, but right off the bat, and they, hearing that song for the first time and realizing this is what I've wanted Paul to do for years, to have this kind of heft to the lyrical content and to the just the sound of the record. The video, it's interesting, again, referring back to the lyrics book, Paul gives a little more insight into the song itself, the fact that a lot of people think it's about his relationship with John and, but he had already written it prior to that. There wasn't, but that he actually wanted to do more with that video that ended up happening. Like he makes a comment, he does like a drawings of like a storyboard for the video. And he says, use Plastic Mac's black suit from the Coming Up video, the suit that he wore in that clip, use that in this video at one point. And so instead of using old film clips, originally it was supposed to be a little bit more developed as a video. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Kit?
I love that song. Not so much the video. I thought it deserved a bit of a better video. I think I think you guys mentioned it in your book, and I agree. The video didn't quite. I don't know. It deserved a better video than that. But I just think it's such a. I don't know. It just, as you said, it just sets the tone for the entire album. It's like an overture, and. I've just always loved it, even the pushing pulling, because it's just emphasizes, the as Paul said in an interview about the push and pull of opposites, and I just think it's beautiful. His voice is just so pure on that track, beautifully arranged by George. It's one of the standouts for me.
Yeah. Cool. Chip?
I've always been more of a fan of Paul's harder edge stuff, more upbeat, poppy things per se. So the first time I heard this album, it's like, oh, this is awfully slow to start out for a McCartney album. So I kind of didn't appreciate it for what it was at the time, and only in living with it for the last 40 years, it's taken on a much greater significance.
Right. Well, talk about, songs that are picked up a little bit more, which I think sometimes I think the next song was the no-brainer to open the album with Take It Away. I don't know if you guys felt the same way about that, but it just seems like a more appropriate opener for this album. I don't know if you guys agree, but big fan of this song. Love it. I remember this is when I discovered Paul as a solo artist back in '82, watching this video. So Kit.
Yeah, I absolutely remember seeing this video when it first aired, and
world premiere video.
Yes, indeed, and yep, I love this song from the jump. I mean, it was just a great piece of pop, and now, you know, I obviously didn't think of it then, but now, yep, Eric Stewart influenced harmonies, those lush vocals, and yeah, I'm not sick of this song. I'm not yet. Not yet. It's just absolutely catchy, great chord changes. One of Paul's best, in my opinion.
Great
it's always been
sleeve.
Great.
It's always been in my top 10 of Paul songs. But Mark?
Oh yeah, I mean it's an amazing song. I think he made the right choice for album opener. Personally, I think that I love the transition from the sort of orchestral end of Tug of War into the drum beats, and it works. That was the way it was meant to be, in my view. But yeah, it's still one of his best singles. I think it deserved to do far better than it did. I mean, it reached number 10, but you know, and which was a surprise at the time. I was thinking, you know, what else do you need here? You know, it's like, this is an amazing song. There's
super
nothing.
Video.
It's
great
perfect.
video.
Yeah, everything.
Video, right.
Yeah, you know, for the time when you needed that, you know, to make an impact with the video, he absolutely nailed it. So, that was
3 months after the album came out. That came out as a single, end of July.
Right.
So maybe the album had been out for too long.
I don't know. I think the problem was too that Ebony and Ivory had such a long
legs. Yeah.
7. You know, if they'd have put it out, it would have had even less impact at the, you know, earlier if they put it out earlier. So I think they were waiting for Ebony and Ivory to die off before they put it out. But still, in all, there's no denying it's in my view one of his best solo pop songs. Fantastic.
Gotcha.
Yep, and Sergey mentions, and I agree, great bass playing. I forgot to mention, great bass on that.
Yep. Yep.
Actually, he had another interesting thought too on there, Sergey, and about, were the critics, do you think, more kind to Paul after John's death? But myself, I think this album was is strong enough to have deserved all the, you know, high praise that it had gotten. So I don't know if, you know, John dying had to do with him starting to get more favorable reviews, which didn't last long because, you know, the albums after this were getting panned, you know, so.
It's not a Rolling Stone 5-star record.
Even though it was a Rolling Stone 5-star record.
Exactly. It didn't
exactly.
necessarily deserve to be.
Right.
No.
Right.
But yeah, I think that there was a lot of anticipation in the lead up to that album coming out. What, you know, for the first time in Paul McCartney's career, he did not release an album in 1981. You know, every single year he had an album before that, and that was
a single or an album.
Yeah, I mean, he released nothing. So the anticipation for Paul and George. George certainly got a lot of, you know, for Somewhere in England, people were like, okay, you know, these are the first statements since John died. What are we going to be getting here? And so there was all that anticipation, which people don't really think about now in retrospect. But at the time, you know, waiting for those records to come out, it was like, oh, you know, what are we going to be getting here? George was kind of a letdown. Tug of War was not. And so I think, you know, Paul delivered, whereas all those years ago felt a little forced, in my opinion, that it was sort of Frankenstein doing into what it was. You know, we'll get to Here Today, but Here Today was, you know, the song, you know, that he did not disappoint with that. So I think your point is well taken about, were the critics giving Paul more of a pass at this point, especially post McCartney 2, which, you know, it had coming up, but, you know, as an album, You know, that was the first album where my jaw dropped when that record came out.
Right.
You know,
well, let's jump to here today because we don't want to be here all night, unfortunately, talking about this. But
here
that
tomorrow.
Right, yeah. But I mean, was it a surprise that this song wasn't a single to you guys? I mean, should it have been a single? Did he need to capitalize on John's death? Or?
Yeah, it was too personal. Yeah, I agree with Chip. I mean, they did sort of a video for it, which I remember was on Friday Night Videos. It was just like still pictures, but that was the only sort of release as a single, quote unquote. But no, I think it was where it needed to be on that record, which was the end of the first side. And yeah, it didn't need to be a single. Yeah.
Right. Chip, here today for you?
No, it's one of the highlights of the record, of many highlights. I think it really hit home on when he played it on the 2002 tour.
Yeah.
Got up there, just himself, and that was really a great moment from that show.
Yeah. Actually, my wife got to see him perform that at the Amoeba show. She was at the Amoeba show in 2007 and said that, I mean, in terms of a connection, she said it was truly the emotional impact that song had on him in that intimate setting, that it was, I mean, he was the I always call it PR Paul, always that totally cracked at that point, that he was in tears, that it was a truly emotional moment. And, boy, I wish I could have been there with her at that, to have witnessed that.
But it's live.
He does. Yeah. And he will, that's his, with that and something,
But I mean, that such a moving song, and I was really glad when he started doing it live, because I always thought that it was a hidden gem for so many years, and I understood why. I mean, yes, I agree, shouldn't have been a single. I mean, it's, as you said, Chip, way too personal, but I'm glad he finally started performing it live, because I did think, while it was personal, it did deserve more attention, because it was such a stunning song. And but I also understood that it probably was hard for him to perform at first. I mean, I don't know how, because it is so emotional and so personal, but and I'm sure there are some nights where it's hard to get through. But it's just one of his best. It's Paul is at his best as a composer and a lyricist. It's just straightforward, absolutely stunning.
Interesting to see too. He did actually change a few lyrics in that. If you again referring back to the lyrics that he, I actually had to make some notes here, so let me see if I can find.
Yeah, you're right. He did change them a little bit.
But he changed a little bit. But he said for the let's see here. Well, he says, I'll just quote, because there's one line in the lyric I don't really mean. Well, knowing you'd probably laugh and say that we were worlds apart. He said, I'm playing to the more cynical side of John, but I don't think it's true that we were so distant. But my view is, I think it was probably very true, because and it always rang that way with me personally, that I thought that was one of the most truthful lines in the whole thing. So I thought that was interesting, that revision. And then the line where he says, I love you, was originally, I see no point.
Wow.
Yeah. So and he crossed that out and added, I love you. But I thought, wow,
that's a
right.
Yeah.
Quite a shift.
That's a huge
quite
change.
A shift. Yeah.
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah. So a couple of points to bring up there, but I thought,
fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. Flipping the album over, we get more, two kind of more upbeat tracks, which are two songs that I really love on this album. We're talking about Ballroom Dancing and The Pound is Sinking. Obviously, you know, The Pound is Sinking, I love because, you know, Paul has such a good knack of taking a couple, you know, smaller pieces and putting them together. And he was doing this for years, you know, obviously. Mark?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly you hear again, going back to those demos, right. I think this may have been an example of George helping him a little bit in this regard, George Martin, saying, hey, you know, I like this bit of this demo, this Hear Me Lover, you know, the whole demo, you don't flesh it out enough, but I like this bit, and then marrying it with the rest of that track is the kind of collaboration that he I think he needed but didn't always want.
Yeah.
To be honest, but that's a perfect example of George Martin sort of shepherding it a bit.
Right. In a way, I felt like it was important for him to add that part in there as well, because of the fact, wasn't he getting accused of fathering a child, you know, years ago, you know, that's, you know, Hear Me Lover, you know, can't be held responsible now, you know.
Well, you
never thought of it that
I never
way.
thought of it that way, but I suppose it could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
That's my research into the song was, you know, but Kit, Ballroom Dancing and Pound is Sinking.
I love Ballroom Dancing. And in fact, I think you guys made the point in your book that Ballroom Dancing was considered as the third single, and then Tug of War ended up being the third single. And yeah, I don't know. I wonder if Ballroom Dancing would have been the better third single, much as I love Tug of War.
Yeah, I think
they wanted to hold Ballroom Dancing for Broad Street.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's right. But
rather than a third single.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But I love Ballroom. I mean, that's another one that I just instantly gravitated toward. Just a classic. I hate to say it, I'm going to have virtual tomatoes thrown at me, I'm sure, but Pound is Sinking is probably my least favorite track on the album.
Oh, wow.
It just, I've just never. I don't know. I've just never really connected to it, and maybe it is because of the, you know, kind of put to like a bunch of it just sounds like a bunch of scraps of different songs put together, which doesn't always, I mean, that's not always a bad thing, of course, but in this one it does. I mean, when I've read your description of how the song came together, there was different parts, I kind of thought, yeah, that's how it sounds. It just does sound like it changes from one tone to the next to the next to the next, and it just doesn't hang together for me. So that's probably the one song on the album that I don't really, but that I think is the weak
interesting
one for me. Yeah. I don't know, it's just my opinion.
Chip.
Sure.
Chip.
Yeah, well, you flip over to side 2 here, and you've got the 3 biggest production pieces on the album. Start out Ballroom Dancing, then bam, Pound is Sinking, then Wanderlust, and it's like, where are we going to go from here? Oh,
yeah. Right. Well, and you know, this was to sort of flash forward to Flowers in the Dirt. I felt the same exact way about Flowers in the Dirt, that you had this what should have been an incredible ending for the album with That Day Is Done, which made perfect sense, and then you flop into How Many People, which is one of the worst songs. Ground. No, Flowers in the Dirt.
Flowers in the Dirt. Mind. My bad. Okay, go ahead. Never mind. My bad.
So you go from from you know, That Day Is Done with that, you know, just again one of those sort of majestic Paul songs written with Costello as a great album ender. And I almost think that, you know, again, if we don't switch the songs out, Wanderlust is a far better album closer than any of the songs that then succeeded. And I felt the same way about Flowers in the Dirt, you know, 7 years later, that he should have ended it. I would have been happier with a shorter album, or at least a rearrange of the tracks. Yeah. Right.
Well, we mentioned Wanderlust because I do want to spend a minute with that. I for me, it's like when I listen to Wanderlust and I listen to Take It Away, I consider those like the best two songs on the album for me personally. I think it's some of Paul's best singing ever on any track in his career. Kate, I was wondering, where do you rank, this song in Wanderlust? I especially singing wise, I think this is one of his best sung songs ever.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I mean, Wanderlust is just gorgeous. It's sort of a mini play in itself. I mean, I couldn't believe when I found out what it was really about. It's like, because he and his family wanted to go on a boat and they wouldn't let him smoke pot. Mm-hmm. Really? That's what the inspiration was, because it sounds like this majestic, epic play, and but it is gorgeous and pretty rangy. I mean, that's a difficult song to sing. But again, I mean, everything from the lyrics to the production to the, the horns, I mean, it's just, I think, a masterpiece. Definitely one of the highlights of the album. I have to give a shout out here to Scott Erickson. He did this song at the fest on the Apple Jam stage. He does a great version of it. So I just got to give him a quick shout out. But yeah, love it. A classic from Paul.
And Kit, just for you, Dadgrass is going to be doing a Wanderlust version of their weed as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
But Mark, Wanderlust for you?
Oh, it's one of his absolute, best songs. Yeah. Solo songs, certainly. Would have been interesting to have heard what George Harrison might have added to it.
There you go.
Yes.
Nothing.
Yeah, I don't know.
That one worked out properly.
Yeah. Well, I agree. It's just, I would have been interested.
Yes.
Not saying it would have improved the song, but it's like what Paul obviously had something in mind there to have asked George to contribute. So I'd been interested in knowing what that would have been. There's no way you improve that song. It's perfection.
Well, Wanderlust is probably the first McCartney-Martin collaboration of the 80s. And it's the first one where you've got that majestic sound to it. You got the air studio piano that you just know something about when Paul plays that, it's going to be one of his great songs. It wasn't one of my favorites when I first heard it, but now it's, best song on the album.
Yeah, it hit me immediately in that 68 Mustang. It was like, this is unbelievable. Again, I was just hearing these songs and thinking, this is what I've been waiting for. As much as I enjoyed London Town and Back to the Egg, and I did not enjoy McCartney 2, these were the songs. It was like, yes. Thank you for giving us these.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I wanted to ask you, hearing that album, obviously your mind was blown when you first heard this album. Do you feel that way now, going back and listening to it? Has your opinions changed at all? Do you still think it's a very strong McCartney record?
Well, I don't feel the same about it that I did then. And again, it's just for the reasons I've mentioned. I don't enjoy the duets. I would happily. They're always. That was the reason that I was glad CDs came along. It was like, I got my Columbia CD of that. It's like, what's that you're doing? Goodbye. I can stop this album. It dressed me up as a robber, and I don't have to get up and take the needle off. It definitely, the best songs on it, I still think are some of the best songs he ever wrote. And I love them just as much as I did then. But the songs that I felt sort of iffy about then are the songs that I could definitely do without now. So as a whole, I wish other things had been done with the song selection.
So would you put this in your top 10 of McCartney records?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Chip?
It was the first album of the third phase of McCartney. We had Beatles Paul, we had Wings Paul, and now we've got solo artist Paul. And was it his last great album? Could be, but
Chaos and Creation.
Flowers and you got Chaos.
Chaos and Creation.
No, it's in the top 3.
Yeah. Chaos and Creation is truly a remarkable album, and that one is one that only gets better with age, and I would not change a single thing about it. And he made, but that again, that says everything about collaboration.
Producer,
right. And right.
And Nigel was, the guy he needed on that record, and unfortunately, he hasn't had it since, and I wish he had. So,
okay, fair. Kit?
Definitely top 5 Paul albums. I've always loved it. I turned to Tug of War again and again. Is it a perfect album? No. I completely agree with that. But it still sounds, on the whole, fresh to me today, the way it was produced, the way it was recorded.
Yeah, it doesn't sound dated at all.
It really doesn't.
No.
Exactly. It really doesn't sound dated to me. And I,
what do you think? Because seriously, I really don't feel, unlike way too many 80s records where it's like, oh my God, you can tell where this came from.
Yeah.
With Tug of War, I never felt that it was, go ahead,
Chip.
I
just wanted to say the 2015 remix of
yeah.
I mean,
horrible.
It did the album no favors. I understand the reasoning behind it, but it really, there were just way too many missed cues and things that sounded more dated on the 2015 than they did on the original.
Well, why do you think they remixed that album?
Because they needed a high-res version of it. And with the way that the original was mixed, it was an early digital mix that could not go, as far as the resolution, it would never go higher than the old 1644 that you'd use for CD. So they had to go back and remix it, but it sounds horrible. It has no life. They sucked all the life out of the mix. It's very flat. It's very mid-rangey. It just, I was stunned.
The original was pretty darn good.
Perfect.
I mean,
it
really
was perfect.
Was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really doesn't sound dated, and always one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely a top 5 McCartney record for me. I mean, if there's a youngster coming up to me and say, "Hey, Tom, what albums?" if I want to be a McCartney fan, what album should I check out? Tug of War is definitely an album that I'm going to give to that person to check out, because I just think a lot of his what he's known for is there on that album. Whether it's singing or songwriting or harmonies, like stuff that we've all brought up throughout this show. I mean, it's all there, and I really think that this is one that should go back to and be listened to often. I do agree that it's there's some stuff on here that I think are a little cringeworthy now. I've never, but like you, Mark, I mean, the songs that I never really cared for the first times I listened to this album, I still really don't care for. But now, I mean, they haven't really grown on me, unfortunately. Get it? I still don't get it. Unfortunately, as much as I love Stevie Wonder, I didn't really think that collaboration worked for this album. I think maybe What You're Doing might have been better on McCartney too. Just my opinion. But
we'll talk later, Tom.
Yeah. But listen, it's still a fantastic album. Obviously, there's a couple tracks that were on the shelves that would have enhanced this album, like we mentioned earlier too. But still, it's still a terrific album, and it still stands up. It still holds. So everybody out there, let us know in the comments, like you've been doing. Everyone, put it in the comments and let us, once this video is over with, and tell us what your thoughts are and what are your highlights, what are the standout tracks on this album. We'd love to know. So Kit, was there any other questions in the comments that we can ask before we sign off?
Well, a number of people agree with your assessments of the remix, the 2015 remix. They agree, awful. Astro Jer asked, what was the reasoning behind the remix? They said just
because a high resolution version of the album to package in the archive series, because that was an element of every archive series release is to include a 2496 version of the album for download. And like Mark said, it was mixed in digital. It wasn't, the sample rate was 1644. And, you know, that's why they had to have the remix.
Okay.
Okay. Another question from Mark Zutkoff, who also said he agreed with me on the pound is sinking. So Mark is clearly, you know, I know Mark. He's very smart. Anyway. Just kidding. He asks, on Dress Me Up as a Robber, was there supposed to be a guitar solo that either was never recorded or was mixed out?
Well, Denny's solo on it was probably there for Montserrat.
Mm-hmm. The Spanish guitar solo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But I don't think there was anything that was left off necessarily.
Okay. All right, great. Well, Mark, why don't you start off and let us know if you're working on anything, if anybody can get a hold of you, or just what have you been up to lately?
Oh, well, I'm working on getting retired in a couple of months here. And but no, I continue to do work with my friend Andrew Sandoval. I'm sort of his notes editor, and you know, whenever he has a project, he issued a Monkeys book last year, a day by day book that I was the primary editor on.
Nice.
So that was the way I spent the better part of the pandemic, was shifting files back and forth.
That thing ended up being almost as heavy as the lyrics book, didn't it?
Oh, its thing is enormous. Yeah. He wanted it to be in the 500 page range, and it ended up being bigger than 8 arms. It was like 800 something. So
wow.
Yeah.
Is that book still available for people if they want to order it?
I don't think so. I think he sold them all, and he has no plans to do anything. He's sort of like ours. It's like when it's done, but we'll see. But that was a real honor to work on that. So that's the kind of thing I'm doing at the moment. Retirement may bring new things. First, it's going to be sorting through my wife Liz's and my collaborative collection. And this, I will have to say, this 8 Arms is the book that brought us together almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
We met as I went out to LA to see the ELO taping the Zoom tour live in 2001.
Cool. Okay.
And I met Liz at a gathering before that, taping at CBS Television City in Hollywood. And so we met and became friends first, and then got married a few years later in 2005. So, and it was, she had bought my book, 2 copies of my book, one for her and one for a friend. So that was our introduction. So I owe my marriage to Chip and to 8 Arms to Hold You, because I don't think it would have happened otherwise. So this book is incredibly meaningful to me as a result.
Very
so
nice.
Little extra added non-tug of war story for you there. But
Jeff Lynne, a little ahead of his time with the whole Zoom thing, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
So anyway, so my plan is to in retirement sort of start. We came to our collections late in life, and we have doubles of many things, because she worked in the music industry for many years, as did I. So we got to go through some doubles and get rid of some stuff. So.
Well, if there's some McCartney doubles out there, maybe we'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good. Chip has first dibs on the vinyl, so he's already Chip, said he's making a special
lose
trip
his
down.
email. Okay.
Yeah.
But Chip, everybody that's familiar with you also knows you for your Lennonology book. Talk about this is still available. You can still buy a copy, and let us know what else you're working on.
One thing on Tug of War I wanted to drive home, because I don't know that we really said it, but it was 40 years ago this week.
Oh, wow.
It came out.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
So well timed. But as you mentioned, Lennonology came out from what was going to be an update of 8 Arms. I started to think of all the things that I wanted to include in the book that weren't there, and I never got past John. So it was a 15-year process from cradle to grave. Came out in 2015, and I still have some hardbacks, and I still have plenty of paperbacks. They can be ordered on the Lennonology.com website.
And that does say .com at the end.
That does say .com at the end.
It really does.
And I'll put the link in the description.
Okay. So that was a huge project, and there's still, I don't want to say the outtakes from that, but the additional material that I prepared at the time for a future volume has just got great information about John and Yoko's career that I think will open a lot of eyes if that gets done. So, but
maybe that's what I'll do in retirement, is push your ass forward.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
Hey, you got to admit, that's
right?
kind of what happened with Lennonology. We
right.
It was hard getting to the end line on that.
Yes, it was.
And so Mark came along, and we
he did the same thing he does for Andrew. I mean, he's a great sounding board and editor, and
So
cool.
let's see what happens.
Right. Excellent. Cool. Kit, what you got going?
All right. Well, first, before I get to that, let me just let everybody know how they can contact us. You can reach us, of course, on our Facebook page. You can reach us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can reach us on our Facebook page, talkmoretalk.com. You can, of course, reach us via email at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. Please send us your feedback. If there are topics that you would like to see us cover, please send that too. You just might see one of your ideas on this show. Of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Our subscriptions are going up, and we thank you so much for your support. Tell your friends, tell everyone you know to hit that subscribe button, help us get our numbers up. And also, of course, if you prefer listening to the audio version, you can subscribe to pretty much any podcasting platform you can think of, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. So all those are the different ways that you can reach us. As far as I go, you can see me sometime this week. I'm not quite sure when, but I will let you know on my Facebook page. The next installment of the greatest shows of the 60s that I co-host with Plastic EP. You all know him, the great host from Australia. Is a lot of fun. This week we will talk about Batman. So that will be a lot of fun. And so yeah, there you go. Pow, whammo. And so that will be sometime this week. I'm not quite sure when yet. As I said, I will let you guys know. Just if you follow me on Facebook, I will post the date and time as soon as I hear the exact details. So I think that's everything from me.
Okay, cool. Well, as we mentioned earlier, unfortunately, Ken Michaels and Joe Mayo can't be here, so please don't forget to take a look at their YouTube channels, Me, Mr. Mayo, also Ken Michaels Radio and Things We Said Today. A lot of great content going on in those channels, and they're growing and growing and getting more and more popular every day. For Two Legs, again, we just we're as busy as ever. We just hit the 1,000 subscriber goal on our YouTube channel. Sorry, I'm tongue tied right now. And we have our little giveaway as well. You can still enter. I think Friday now we're going to announce the winner, but we're giving away the Wings Wildlife Half Speed Master and the red vinyl from of McCartney from 2017. There's still time to enter. All you got to do is email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. You can go to our 1,000 subscribers video on YouTube YouTube. Or if you're a YouTuber, you can make your own video and just tell us your favorite album from each decade. What was your favorite McCartney record from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010? And you will be entered to win that contest. So that's it for now. We'll get into more later on, but I don't want to take up any more time from these two gentlemen. I want to thank you guys for appearing on the show, talking about the very wonderful Tug of War. And don't forget, please, people, look into their 8 Arms to Hold You ebook. It's like they said, they put some more work into it. They got rid of some words. They added some more stuff, some more session detail in there. And I'm sure that mind will be blown when you look into this book, because you will learn so much from this book. Even if you're from your beginner to a hardcore fan, there's something for everybody in this book. So it's really a must-have.
You need this for your library.
Yes,
you need
definitely.
It.
Yes, please check it out, and hopefully we'll get Mark and Chip back at a later date. It's great having you guys here.
Love to have
everybody
you back.
out there,
thank you for asking us. We appreciate it.
Loved having you on.
Great. Had a lot of fun.
Good. So for Mark, for Chip, Kit, I'm Tom, and as always, everybody out there, have a great day and a beautiful night. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.